The sun was soft that Sunday evening in Lagos. The kind of glow that made everything feel sacred. Behind Zara's grandfather's compound stood the tall olive tree, leaning gently like an old friend. Beneath it stood two children. Zara, just 10, and David, 11. Their Sunday clothes, slightly dusty from running around after service. "I'm serious, David," Zara said, her eyes wide and full of something too deep for her age. "No matter what happens, promise me we won't ever stop serving God." David looked at her for a second, then nodded. "I promise. No matter where we go, we'll always come back to God and each other." They sealed it with a pinky promise and knelt right there. Small hands clasped, heads bowed. "God, please help us never forget you," Zara prayed. "Even when we're big people." David added, "Help us stay close to you and to each other." Neither child knew how deeply the tree would root itself in their destiny. Years passed. Zara and David both gained admission into Unilag. It felt like divine orchestration. David got in first, studying computer science. A year later, Zara joined, studying English and literary studies. Somehow, they ended up attending the same campus fellowship. "Zara, that's you?" David had shouted one Thursday evening, mid-rehearsal. "David." "Oh my God!" She ran to hug him. The room echoed with their laughter. Everyone turned to look. From that moment, they were inseparable again. There was a rhythm between them that even outsiders noticed. Zara looked up at him and said, "Do you remember the promise we made under the olive tree?" David smiled. "I never forgot, not one word." They grew from friends to something more, quiet love wrapped in shared purpose. But love wasn't the only thing that grew. So did attention. That was when Brittany entered the picture. She was a passionate chorister, strong voice, beautiful spirit, but visibly burdened. Zara noticed her struggling and befriended her. "Don't worry, Brittany," she said one evening, handing her a scarf. "I've got you." She meant it. Zara didn't even think twice. When Brittany confided in her about struggling to afford a decent apartment, Zara called her parents. "Mommy, she's not asking for much," Zara said over the phone. "Just until she can save up, she's a good girl." After some hesitation, her mom agreed, "Okay. But let her know it's temporary. And you both should still focus on your studies and your spiritual life." And just like that, Brittany moved in. The room wasn't big, but they made it work, sharing space, food, and late-night conversations. Zara lent her hairpieces, blouses, and her extra pair of black worship shoes. David would visit once or twice a week from his apartment in Lagos. He had just landed a solid tech job, and though young, he carried himself like a man grounded by faith and purpose. He never came empty-handed. Grocery bags filled with everything from cereal to shower gels. Sometimes even small luxury treats like body sprays or pastries from malls. Zara would help him unpack. Brittany, always polite, would join in too. "Thank you so much, David," she'd say, flashing a grateful smile. At first, it was normal. But soon, Zara noticed things. Brittany began to dress differently whenever David was coming. A bit more makeup, glossier lips. She laughed louder, talked more, even offered to cook sometimes, which she rarely did otherwise. Zara brushed it off. Until one night, she dreamt. Brittany stood in a white dress, her hand stretched out toward David. David looked confused, almost like he was following her. Zara woke with a jolt, heart pounding. The olive tree flashed through her mind. But instead of praying, she sighed, glanced at her reading timetable, and said, "Final year fever." The distance didn't start with silence, it began with small complaints. David sighed as he left Zara's apartment one evening, the Lagos traffic waiting to swallow him. "You barely even looked up from your laptop today," he muttered as he stepped into his car. Zara, still seated by her table, frowned. "I told you I have 2 projects due, David. You came late too. What did you expect?" They had never spoken this way before. Not with such edge. David got home that night and didn't even pray, just dropped on his bed. Work was exhausting, and Zara's coldness left a strange ache in his chest. On her side, Zara felt it too, the distance. But she chalked it up to stress. Final year in Unilag was a jungle. Between her supervisor's endless corrections, fellowship rehearsals, and family pressure, she barely had room to think. In that gap, Brittany became convenient. She cooked more, asked David questions about his job, laughed at all his dry jokes. One Sunday evening, she entered the living room in Zara's fitted blouse, the same one David once complimented. David did a double take. She smiled. "You like it?" "Zara lent it to me." He smiled faintly, but deep down, he knew that smile stayed longer than it should have. Meanwhile, Zara had another dream. The olive tree again. This time it was dry. Brittany and David stood under it, their backs to her. She called out, but her voice was mute. She woke up sweating, reached for her Bible, then dropped it again. "I'll pray after defense," she whispered, and reached for her phone instead. But the spiritual atmosphere around them was shifting. What started as little cracks were becoming open doors. And someone, Brittany, had started walking through them. David sat on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city lights blink in the distance. Lagos never really slept, and neither did the heaviness on his chest. Something had shifted in him, in Zara, in everything. His phone buzzed. "Brittany, hope you ate this evening. You work too hard." He hesitated, then typed, "I did. Thank you." Zara hadn't checked in all day. But Brittany had. Twice. At first, it had irritated him how she always popped up with soft concern. Now, it brought strange comfort. The following Tuesday, after fellowship, Brittany lingered while others packed up instruments. "David," she called, her voice lower than usual. "Can I talk to you?" He paused. "Sure." She stepped closer, too close. "You know, you're a good man. I just feel like you deserve someone who understands where you are now." He looked at her, startled. "Brittany, I'm not trying to come between you and Zara." She interrupted, her hand grazing his. I'm here." The silence stretched. David didn't pull his hand away. Meanwhile, Zara was seated in a corner of the library, lost in her thesis. Her mind drifted suddenly to David, to the olive tree, to the strange, heavy feeling she'd been brushing off. She opened her notebook and scribbled down, "David, Brittany, dreams." Then she sighed, tucked it in, and returned to her work. No prayers. No warfare. The enemy didn't need full access. Just the unlocked door of neglect. And at that moment, the spiritual hedge around their love began to wear thin. Not from storms outside, but from the silence inside. A love rooted in prayer was now gasping for breath. And Brittany? She was no longer knocking gently. She had started walking in boldly. Let's just not overthink it, David told himself as he adjusted the mic stand. Fellowship rehearsal had ended, but Brittany stayed behind again. She was wearing Zara's blouse. The same one David had once said made Zara look like royalty. "You were fire on that keyboard today," Brittany said, leaning against the wall. Her tone laced with warmth. David chuckled. "Thanks." She stepped closer. "I'm always here for you, David. Don't let anyone make you feel unseen." Her hand brushed his arm. He didn't move away. He didn't move closer either. But in the realm of the spirit, that hesitation was costly. Back in Lagos, Zara sat before her mirror, her eyes tired. She looked at her phone, no message from David. Again. She texted him. "Zara, I miss you. You've been distant." David didn't reply immediately. Zara blinked back tears. Then reached for her Bible. Her fingers hesitated on the cover. Her prayer life was now a cycle of postponement. Her worship had become mechanical. Later that night, she knelt briefly. "God, please help us," she whispered, tears falling. But her words were light, not from the Spirit. Not from the olive tree. And while she prayed halfway, Brittany fasted for 3 days. Not to draw closer to God, but to own what wasn't hers. Any loophole is an entry, a whisper echoed in the spirit realm. The hedge was almost gone. And David, still God's child, was starting to feel hollow, but he couldn't explain it. Something was off. He stood alone one evening, outside his Lekki apartment, and said quietly, "Lord, what's happening to me?" But he didn't wait for the answer. And heaven watched, waiting for someone to truly pray. David sat on the edge of his bed, gripping the edge of his bedsheet like it could ground him. He had just woken up from a dream. He was standing in a church, alone. The room was dim, candles flickering. Then he saw himself under the olive tree again. Only now, Zara was weeping beside it. But he turned and walked away. He jolted awake in a sweat, his chest heaving. "What kind of dream is this?" he muttered. That Sunday, he didn't go to church. Instead, he lay in bed while Brittany sent another thinking of you text. He responded with a heart emoji. Nothing else. Meanwhile, Zara stood during worship at church. Mic in hand, but her voice trembled. Not from emotion, from emptiness. She wasn't hearing God like she used to. Something had shifted. After service, her pastor called her aside. "Zara, you carry grace, but you're losing oil. Don't let distractions rob your altar." Zara nodded, but her heart sank. Later that night, she pulled out an old notebook. The one she'd written the olive tree covenant in. Her eyes welled with tears. "God," she whispered, "where did we go wrong?" Across the city, David sat silently on his couch. No TV. No music. Just stillness. And in the stillness, the wind outside whistled softly, like a whisper. He stood, walked to his balcony, and looked out over Lagos. For the first time in weeks, he closed his eyes and said, God, are you still there? A shift happened in the atmosphere. A crack of light pierced through the clouds in the spirit. It wasn't a return. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And God, rich in mercy, was already waiting. David sat in his sleek office overlooking the Lagos traffic. Fingers frozen on his keyboard. He had been staring at the same paragraph of his report for nearly 20 minutes. Something was off inside him. The achievements, the money, even Brittany's attention. None of it was filling the silence in his soul. His phone buzzed. Brittany, thinking of you. Hope you're eating well. He didn't reply. He minimized his screen and stared at his wallpaper. A photo from university fellowship days. Zara beside him, both smiling, hands lifted in worship. A lump formed in his throat. That night, he had a dream. He stood at the foot of the olive tree again, this time older, weighed down. The branches stretched out, dry and bent, yet the roots glowed faintly. Zara stood across from him, whispering a prayer. He fell to his knees. God. I forgot, David cried in the dream. When he woke up, tears streaked down his cheeks. He dressed quickly and drove. Not to work, not to church, but to the fellowship ground. The gates were open. He walked in slowly, heart pounding. There was no one else there. Just the wind, the concrete, and a distant echo of worship from some classroom nearby. He knelt. God, I left the covenant. I left the altar, he whispered. I want you back. A stillness fell over him. Suddenly, it was as if light filled the place. A presence he hadn't felt in months wrapped around him. And as he wept on the concrete floor of the fellowship hall, heaven rejoiced. Across town, Zara woke up in the middle of the night. No dream this time, just a strong, undeniable urge to pray. She knelt, heart racing. And for the first time in months, both hearts reached for heaven at the same time. David couldn't sleep that night. After praying at the fellowship center, a fire had been reignited in him. One that had grown cold for too long. He got home and picked up his Bible. Every verse he opened to seemed to whisper the same message, return to me, and I will return to you. He fell on his knees. God, I'm so sorry, he cried. I let lust win. I let distance rob me. I walked away from what you gave me. As he prayed, something invisible broke in the spirit. And across Lagos, in a rented room where Brittany lived, she sat up suddenly, gasping. The pot she kept hidden in her wardrobe, the one filled with scented oils and thread she has been using on David's clothes, suddenly cracked. Her candles, half burnt from the night before, flickered violently and went out. Jesus! She screamed, frightened. She had gone too far, mixing her sweet voice and soft looks with something much darker. But grace was still working. At the same time, Zara, back at her parents' house for the weekend, was praying too. Her mother had noticed her tears and quietly placed her hand on her shoulder. God will restore whatever you've committed to him, her mom whispered. Zara cried harder. I didn't protect him, Mom. I didn't pray enough. But you're praying now, she replied gently. And God hears. The covenant still stands. In the spirit, the olive tree was blooming again. Its roots had remained deep and hidden. And as prayers rose again from both Zara and David, mercy watered the roots. What the enemy tried to bury was not dead. The love was still alive, and heaven had already begun the restoration. A year had passed. David stood before the olive tree, or what remained of it. The university grounds had been redeveloped, and the tree now sat behind a quiet walkway near the chapel building. It wasn't as grand as before, but it was still there. And so was the memory. Zara walked toward him slowly, her white veil blowing softly in the Lagos breeze. Her gown shimmered with grace, not just because it was beautiful, but because of what it represented: mercy, restoration, and a promise made and kept. David turned, his eyes soft with emotion. "You came. I never left," she whispered. "I was just learning to pray again." He chuckled, eyes glistening. "Me too." They stood under the tree, the same way they did years ago. Only now, they were older, wiser, and fully aware of what it meant to keep a covenant. At their wedding altar later that afternoon, the officiating pastor declared, "What God has joined together. No enchantment, no distraction, and no mistake shall put asunder." This marriage is not just a union, it is a testimony. Brittany sat quietly in the congregation. She looked different, healed. Months earlier, she had come forward at a revival service and confessed everything. The potions, the lies, the intentions. She had wept bitterly. Zara had hugged her afterward. "I forgive you," she had said, "because I was also asleep when I should have been awake." Now, Brittany sang at the wedding choir with tears in her eyes. Not of shame, but of gratitude. The final worship song echoed through the air. "Those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish like a palm tree." And under the shade of the olive tree, two hearts beat as one. A love that fell had risen again, all for His glory.